Tom, did you ever think we'd end up here? I mused, glancing around our living room. The walls still smelled of fresh paint, and our furniture, a mix of old and new, gave the place a feeling of warmth. Tom, sprawled on the couch after a long day, smiled. Honestly, Anna, I always hoped for something like this, but never really believed it. He had a way of saying things, simple, honest. That's one of the things I loved about him. I sat down next to him, still marveling at our good fortune. This house, it's more than I ever dreamed of. Your grandma would be proud of you, making a life like this. He nodded, his eyes reflecting a mix of emotions. Yeah, she was the only good thing in my childhood. After Dad died and Mom, well, I did know. Tom's mom was a topic we rarely touched. She lost her rights to him after years of neglect and worse. Tom grew up tough, decided not to be like his folks. He worked hard, got himself through college, and became an engineer. Me, I'm a lawyer, came from a simpler, less dramatic background. We met at a mutual friend's party and, well, the rest is history. So, what do you think about inviting my parents over for dinner this weekend? I asked, changing the subject. His family history was tough, and I didn't want to dwell on it. Tom chuckled. Your mom's cooking or yours? Hey, I'll have you know I've been practicing, I retorted with a playful nudge. Practice makes perfect, babe. But maybe keep the fire extinguisher handy, just in case, he teased, dodging my mock swat. We laughed, and at that moment, I felt a wave of contentment wash over me. We had our struggles, but we were building something beautiful together. Suddenly, the doorbell rang, slicing through our tranquility. Tom raised an eyebrow. Expecting anyone? No, I replied, puzzled. It's probably just a neighbor or a salesperson. I opened the door, and there stood a woman, probably in her late 50s, but life had clearly been rough on her. Beside her was a man with a look that didn't exactly scream, friendly neighbor. The woman's eyes darted past me, surveying the inside of our home. Well, aren't you going to invite your mother in, Thomas? Tom's face went pale as he stood up. Mom? What are you doing here? I glanced at Tom, my mind racing. This was the woman he hadn't seen in years, the cause of so much of his pain. The air suddenly felt heavy, charged with a tension that had no place in our new beginning. The woman at our door, Tom's mother, had a hard look in her eyes, like she'd seen too much and cared too little. The man next to her, well, he just looked tough, like trouble. Tommy, aren't you going to say hello to your ma? She said, her voice raspy, probably from years of smoking. Tom stood frozen for a moment before managing, hello, Mom. It's been a long time. I could see he was struggling, torn between politeness and old, deep wounds. I stepped up. I'm Anna, Tom's wife. Can we help you with something? She looked me over, her gaze sharp. Oh, so you're the one who snatched up my Tommy. Nice place you got here, she said, pushing past me into the house. The man followed without a word, his presence filling the room uncomfortably. Tom and I exchanged a look, his saying, I'm sorry, and mine saying, it's not your fault. We followed them into the living room. So, Mom, what brings you here? Tom asked, his voice steady, but I could hear the underlying tension. She plopped down on our sofa, making herself at home. Well, Tommy, life's been hard. Your ma's had a tough time. Lost my place, nowhere to go. Figured my son would help me out, The man, still silent, just nodded along. I was floored. This was the woman who had neglected Tom, and now she was here, expecting help? I'm sorry to hear that, but Tom's life hasn't been easy either, I said, a bit more sharply than I intended. Tom shot me a warning glance, but I was past caring. This woman had some nerve. Tom's mom laughed, a harsh sound. Oh, I know all about my Tommy's tough life. But he's got it good now, right? A fancy house, a pretty wife. Time to give back to his dear old mom. The man finally spoke up, his voice gruff. Yeah, we just need a place to crash for a bit, get back on our feet. I felt my anger rising. A place to crash? You can't just show up and expect to. Tom cut me off. Anna, let's talk about this outside. He led me to the kitchen, away from the unwanted guests. Anna, I know this is messed up, but I can't just turn her away. She's my mom. Your mom who abandoned you, Tom. I hissed. She can't just waltz in here and take over our lives. Tom ran his hands through his hair, a sure sign he was stressed. I know. But what if we help her find a place, just temporarily? Get her off our backs. I stared at him, incredulous. And what? We're supposed to pay for it. Tom, she's using you. He looked down, defeated. I just don't want any trouble, Anna. Maybe if we help her now, she'll leave us alone later. We went back to the living room, where his mom was making herself a bit too comfortable. Mom, we'll help you find a place, but you can't stay here, Tom said, more firmly than I expected. She looked like she was about to argue, but then shrugged. Fine, as long as you're paying. Can't say no to free rent, right? Tom nodded, and I felt a knot form in my stomach. This was far from over. We found a small, cheap apartment for Tom's mom and her partner, thinking this would be a temporary fix. But a week later, Tom's phone rang, and I could tell from his face it was her. Hey, Mom, what's up? Tom's voice had that forced cheerfulness he used when he was uncomfortable. I couldn't hear her words, but the tone was unmistakable, demanding, whiny. Tom's face fell as he listened. Yeah, I understand money's tight, Tom said, trying to keep his voice even. But we already paid this month's rent and... I watched as he ran his other hand through his hair, a sure sign he was stressed. He listened for a few more minutes, his expression growing more strained. Okay, I'll see what I can do, he finally said, sounding defeated. He hung up and looked at me, his face a mix of frustration and guilt. She needs money for groceries, bills, says they can't find jobs, Tom explained, sounding exhausted. I felt a surge of anger. Tom, we can't keep doing this. She's taking advantage of you. He sighed, looking torn. I know, but what else can I do? She's my mom. I shook my head, feeling helpless. Fine, but this is the last time. You need to tell her that. Tom nodded and went to get his checkbook. I couldn't believe we were dipping into our savings for her. It just didn't feel right. The next couple of weeks were quiet, and I foolishly hoped things had settled down. But then, one evening, Tom came home looking more stressed than ever. What's wrong? I asked, concerned. It's my mom. She and her partner got kicked out of the apartment. What? Why? I was shocked but not entirely surprised. They were caught drinking and making a scene. The landlord's fed up. They've got nowhere to go, Tom explained, rubbing his forehead. I was furious. So what now? They expect us to take them in? Tom looked helpless. I don't know, Anna. She's saying they'll be on the streets. I couldn't believe this was happening. Tom, you can't let her walk all over you. She's manipulating you. He knew I was right, but he was still torn. I can't leave her homeless, Anna. I felt trapped in an impossible situation. We argued back and forth, neither of us wanting to give in. In the end, we agreed to let them stay for a couple of nights, just until they found another place. That evening, when Tom's mom and her partner arrived with their bags, I felt like our home was being invaded. Thanks for letting us crash here, Tommy, his mom said, looking around our living room like she owned the place. Her partner just grunted, dropping his bags on the floor. I forced a smile. It's just for a couple of nights, right? She waved her hand dismissively. Yeah, just until we sort things out. I didn't believe her for a second. As they settled in, making themselves a little too comfortable, I felt a knot of anxiety in my stomach. This was far from over, and I had a bad feeling about where it was all heading. The couple of nights quickly turned into a week, and Tom's mom, Marlene, and her partner, Ray, made themselves at home in the worst possible way. They were loud, messy, and had no respect for our space. But things came to a head one Tuesday evening. I came home from work to find Marlene rummaging through my dresser. My heart raced, and anger bubbled up inside me. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" I demanded, storming into the room. Marlene jumped, caught off guard. "Just looking for a scarf or something, it's chilly in here," she said nonchalantly, but I saw the lie in her eyes. "That's my personal stuff. You have no right." I was shaking with rage. Marlene rolled her eyes. "Relax, I wasn't going to take anything. Just borrowing, that's all." I grabbed the scarf from her hands. "This is not a free-for-all, Marlene. You need to respect our privacy." Tom walked in just then, catching the tail end of our argument. "What's going on here?" "Your wife's flipping out because I borrowed a scarf," Marlene said, playing the victim. Tom looked at me, then at his mom, torn. "Mom, you should have asked first. Anna's right." Marlene huffed, muttering something under her breath as she left the room. Tom gave me an apologetic look. "I'm sorry, Anna. I'll talk to her." But it was clear talking wasn't going to solve anything. Marlene and Ray continued to overstep their boundaries. They left dirty dishes everywhere, smoked inside the house despite our no-smoking rule, and the TV was always blaring. One evening, I found Ray lounging on our couch, beer cans littered around him. The TV was so loud I could hear it from the driveway. "Can you turn that down? It's way too loud," I said, reaching for the remote. Ray grabbed it before I could. "I was watching that. It's our house, our TV. You need to respect our rules," I shot back, frustration mounting. Ray just smirked. "Your house, huh? Seems like it's Tommy's mom's house now." I was at my breaking point. "Tom, we need to talk. Now." Tom came in, looking exhausted. "What's up?" "Your mom and Ray, they're walking all over us." "This can't go on," I said, my voice shaking with anger. Tom ran his hand through his hair, a sign that he was stressed. I know. I'll find them another place tomorrow. I promise." But as I looked around at the mess, the blaring TV, and the strangers who had invaded our home, I wondered if it was a promise he could keep. The days following Marlene and Ray's departure were a cautious return to normalcy. Tom and I were slowly reclaiming our space, our peace. But that fragile sense of security shattered, quite literally, one afternoon. I was in the garden, pulling weeds and trying to clear my head, when Mr. Jenkins, our next-door neighbor, called out to me from his yard. He's an older man, always friendly, but today he looked concerned. "Anna," he said, his voice carrying a note of urgency. "I've been meaning to talk to you. Saw something odd the other day." I straightened up, brushing dirt off my hands. "What's up, Mr. Jenkins?" He hesitated, then said, "It's about your house. I saw a woman, your mother-in-law I think, letting herself in while you and Tom were out. Thought you should know." My heart sank. "She was here? In our house?" He nodded solemnly. "Yeah, she had a key or something. Just thought it was strange, is all." Thanking Mr. Jenkins, I hurried inside to find Tom. "Tom," I said, trying to keep my voice steady, "Mr. Jenkins saw Marlene entering our house when we weren't here. We need to change the locks." Tom's face hardened. "Let's do it. Now." We called a locksmith and had all the locks changed that day. It felt like a small victory, a reclaiming of our boundaries. But the sense of violation lingered, unsettling and raw. A few days later, our newfound peace was shattered again. I came home from work to find our front windows broken, glass strewn across the living room floor. My heart raced with anger and fear. Tom arrived soon after and was equally shocked. "Who would do this?" he asked, though I could tell he already suspected the answer. I pulled out my phone and dialed Marlene's number. She answered on the third ring, her voice smug and unapologetic. "Hello, Anna. Something you want?" she sneered. "You know why I'm calling." "The windows, Marlene. Did you do this?" I demanded, my voice shaking with anger. Her laugh was cold, devoid of remorse. "Oh, honey, you can't prove a thing. But let's just say you should be more generous with your money. Things might get worse otherwise." I felt a chill run down my spine. "Is that a threat, Marlene?" "Take it as you like," she replied, her voice dripping with malice. I ended the call, my hands trembling. Tom looked at me, his expression a mix of rage and helplessness. "What did she say?" "She basically threatened us. Said we should give her money, or things could get worse," I replied, trying to keep my composure. Tom clenched his fists. "This has to stop. She can't keep terrorizing us like this." That evening, Tom and I sat in our living room, the broken windows boarded up, casting long shadows across the floor. The silence between us was thick, charged with anger and frustration. "We can't live like this, Tom," I said, breaking the silence. "We need to do something about your mom." Tom, looking exhausted, nodded. "I know, Anna. I don't know what to do." I took a deep breath. "What if we set a trap for her, catch her in the act?" Tom looked at me, surprised. "A trap? How?" I leaned forward, my mind racing. "We could pretend to go away for a few days. Make it seem like the house is empty. If she's bold enough to break a window, she might try to come in again." Tom's eyes narrowed as he considered it. "And then what?" "We catch her red-handed." "Exactly. We could set up cameras, maybe even get the police involved," I suggested, feeling a surge of hope. Tom was silent for a moment, then nodded slowly. "Okay, let's do it. But we need to be careful. If she suspects anything, we won't let her suspect." "We'll be smart about it," I assured him. The next day, we started our plan. We made a show of packing our car, talking loudly about a weekend getaway for anyone who might be listening. Mr. Jenkins, ever the observant neighbor, wished us a good trip over the fence. "Thanks, Mr. Jenkins. We'll be back in a few days," I called out, waving. Once we were sure Marlene could have seen or heard about our departure, we drove around the block and parked our car in a friend's garage. Then, we snuck back to our house as night fell, careful to stay out of sight. Inside, we set up cameras in the main rooms and made sure everything was locked up tight. We turned off all the lights and waited in the dark, the silence around us almost deafening. "This is crazy," Tom whispered at one point, his voice tense. "Yeah, but it's necessary," I whispered back, clutching his hand for reassurance. Hours passed, and just when I started to doubt Marlene would show, we heard a faint noise at the back door. My heart raced as we watched the camera feed on Tom's laptop. There she was, Marlene, fiddling with the lock. Beside her was Ray, looking around nervously. "I can't believe she's actually doing this," Tom hissed under his breath. "Shh! Wait for it," I said, my eyes glued to the screen. The door creaked open, and they stepped inside, Marlene leading the way. They didn't notice the camera, too busy looking around for things to steal. "Okay, let's call the police now," I said, reaching for my phone. Tom nodded, his face a mask of mixed emotions. "Yeah, let's end this." I dialed 911, my voice steady as I explained the situation. The operator assured us officers were on their way. We watched as Marlene and Ray rummaged through our stuff, anger and disbelief churning inside me. But I knew this was it, the moment we'd catch them and finally put an end to this nightmare. Minutes later, we heard the sirens, and soon the police were at our door. Marlene and Ray's shock was almost satisfying as the officers handcuffed them. The cold evening air was thick with tension as the police car's lights painted our quiet street in shades of blue and red. Marlene and Ray, handcuffed and being led away, looked like two animals caught in a trap. The neighbors, drawn out by the commotion, watched from their front yards, a mixture of curiosity and concern etched on their faces. Marlene's voice, shrill and indignant, shattered the night's calm. "Tommy, you can't do this to me. I'm your mother, for God's sake." Tom, standing firm beside me, his hand gripping mine as if for support, replied with a voice that trembled slightly, "Mom, it's not about what I can or can't do. It's about what you did. Breaking into our house, threatening us. You left us no choice." Ray, the usually silent and brooding figure, spat out his words with venom. "You think you're all high and mighty now, huh? Calling the cops on your own family? This ain't over, boy." Officer Martinez, a stern-looking woman with an air of no-nonsense about her, stepped in front of them. "That's enough. You are both being charged with breaking and entering and harassment. You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law." As she continued to read them their rights, a sense of surrealism washed over me. I glanced at the faces of our neighbors, their expressions ranging from shock to pity, and felt a pang of embarrassment. This was not how I envisioned our life in this quiet neighborhood. Once the police cars had driven away, leaving behind a trail of whispers and murmured gossip, Tom and I retreated to the privacy of our living room. The broken window, with its jagged edges glistening in the moonlight, stood as a grim reminder of the night's events. We stood there for a while, holding each other, finding comfort in the silence. It was a moment of peace amidst the chaos, a reminder that despite everything, we were not alone. "Let's fix this window first thing tomorrow," Tom finally said, pulling back slightly to look at me. "I want to leave tonight behind us. Start fresh." I nodded, feeling a sense of determination rising within me. "Yes, let's do that. Let's reclaim our home, our life. No more looking back." As we started cleaning up the glass, piece by piece, the enormity of what had happened began to sink in. We had confronted our nightmare, faced it head-on. It was a moment of closure, a turning point. Our life together had been tested, but we had emerged stronger, more united. The morning after the ordeal, Tom and I found ourselves sitting in the quiet of our kitchen, the early sun casting a soft glow through the windows. The events of the previous night seemed almost surreal, like a bad dream that we had finally awoken from. Tom, with a contemplative look, broke the silence first. "Well, looks like Mom's finally out of our lives for good this time," he said, a hint of relief mixed with sadness in his voice. I nodded, wrapping my hands around my coffee mug. "Yeah, after the threat of another prison term, I don't think she'll be bothering us again." "And Ray. I can't believe he was wanted for theft and robbery. Now he's facing a real prison sentence," Tom added, shaking his head. "It's a lot to process," I admitted. "But at least we can start to move forward now, put all this behind us." Tom leaned back in his chair, looking out the window. "I feel like a huge weight has been lifted off my shoulders. I just wish things could have been different, you know?" I reached across the table, taking his hand. "I know. But we did what we had to do. Now we can focus on us, our future." The conversation gradually shifted to lighter topics, plans for fixing up the house, and maybe taking that long-overdue vacation we had been talking about. It felt good to think about normal things again, to plan for a future that was no longer overshadowed by fear and uncertainty.